And my job was to constantly innovate around how to use seismic data for different applications, things like making underground coal mining safer, using multi-component seismic data to predict lithologies, and for the live monitoring of oil and gas fields using seismic data. And these days, as a technical leader and manager, I'm also responsible for leading and motivating others in innovative geophysical practices in my company. But to be honest, most of what I've learned about relating to processes and strategies and management of innovation has come from my volunteer work. So for over 20 years, I've volunteered at national and international levels of not-for-profit organisations as a leadership facilitator, operational manager, and a board director. And in these roles, I've had to design business structures and engagement strategies to promote and support innovation. I've had to facilitate creative idea generation across national and international groups of people and design ways to support the implementation of innovative ideas. And I've had to evaluate innovation projects to understand the value they bring and where necessary to innovate further to recreate and amplify their value. So today, I hope to add to your knowledge bank around leading for innovation, to support you to become a greater force of influence in your own organisations for making innovation happen. So why do we care about innovation? Well, in a global survey facilitated by McKinsey in 2008, it was found that over 70% of senior executives around the world believe that innovation was one of the top 3 drivers for growth. And I suspect if we asked the same question a decade later, we would have even more executives believing in the value of innovation for business growth. Because innovation can increase revenue through new products and services, and it can decrease costs through improved efficiency. Now, in the field of geophysics, I'm always pushing for the need for innovation because we need to learn how to work effectively with the huge geophysical digital data sets that we now have to work with. We collect larger and larger data sets all the time. In addition, we're having to figure out how to integrate our geophysical data sets with other types of data that we've never integrated before. We also need innovation to help us extract more detail about the subsurface because we're targeting ever more complex hydrocarbon reservoirs and mineral deposits. So innovation is important in the oil and gas industry. Before we explore further, let's clarify what we mean by innovation. So innovation is a fresh way of thinking or doing that creates value. No, it's the practical translation of new and different ideas into new or improved products, services, or processes. Now, innovation is not the same as just thinking creatively. So creative thinking is a thinking process through which original patterns are formed. It's about bringing something new into being that didn't exist before. But creative thinking is just one step in the innovation process. Creative thinking has no requirement for practicality or for adding value. But in contrast, innovation is the result of thinking creatively in a deliberate way about a recognised problem or an existing challenge and delivering value to a person or a group of people or an organisation as a result of that process. So innovation is directed, specific, and it creates value. Now, not every change that takes place in our workplaces qualifies as innovation. So all of you will be familiar with the minor routine adjustments that you have to make every day in your job, and they're necessary for you to be successful. This involves change and adaptation, but it's not considered innovation. On the other hand, we could be subject to massive paradigm shifts that occur externally to the company, and they could change the face of work for everyone so that we all have to do things differently. This also involves change, but it doesn't describe innovation. So the types of things that we're considering innovation fall into 4 categories. And you can see those on the slide in front of you. So incremental innovation is the style of innovation when new ways of work are created to add value based on technology that already exists, and the innovation could have been anticipated. So it's like a logical next step that adds value to your customer within the existing market. And almost all companies engage in incremental innovation. Disruptive innovation involves applying a new technology or process to your company's current market. It's stealthy by nature because often newer technology might initially be quite difficult to get working, but after a few iterations, prototyping, it can surpass existing technology. But by then it's probably too late for competitors to compete against that new technology. A prominent example of disruptive innovation is Apple's iPhone. So it disrupted the mobile phone market because prior to the iPhone, we relied on buttons and keypads and wheels for user input. And now we all use touch screens. Architectural innovation simply is about taking the lessons, the skills, the existing technology in your company and picking them up and applying them all to a different market. This innovation will increase your customer base, provided the new market is receptive to what you're offering. And the innovation comes from the minor tweaks that you need to do to meet the needs of the new market. And finally, radical innovation. Radical innovation gives birth to new industries. It may swallow existing ones. At the same time, it creates revolutionary technology. So, for example, the introduction of ice factories, where factories made ice, they wiped out the profession of ice cutters, where people went and cut ice from frozen rivers and lakes. But then there was another radical innovation, that every home could have its own ice machine in the form of a fridge freezer, and that removed the need for ice factories entirely. So these are examples of radical innovation that invented new technologies and created completely new markets. So in the act of innovating, we can't consider it a one-off project. It's not something that just starts and stops. It's a continuous cycle, and that cycle repeats over and over again. And the innovation cycle, no matter what type of innovation you're undertaking, includes 5 core steps that you can see on the screen. Now, you may find that you spend different amounts of time in each of these steps according to the type of innovation, but you will still move through each of the 5 steps. So we start with the idea stage. And the idea stage in the innovation cycle is where a problem is identified, and then you go through a focused creative thinking process to consider ways in which you can address the problem. So this is the early stage of collecting any and all innovation potential. Now, if you go through the engage step, this is where we do an extensive analysis of your preliminary ideas, and it's where you engage other experts in your company. You talk to your existing customers, you research new markets, and you talk to all the people involved in the practical implementation of the innovation. Every successful innovation initiative has an extensive communication plan. Now, the solution step is where you work on the development and testing of the optimum solution, and that leads you to the finished process, product or service. It's actually quite difficult to move from a creative idea to a practical implementation. So it's important to have a very productive team of people that will help steward the innovation through to completion. And they need to be prototyping, refining ideas, researching, collaborating, communicating. It's here you'll need organisational allies and management buy-in to the innovation that's being proposed. In the value creation stage, you need to implement your innovation. And this is where you deliver your innovative process, product or service through production, logistics, training, marketing, sales, wherever it is that you're adding value to your organisation. If you don't get round to implementing your product, then you haven't innovated, because you must deliver value for it to be an innovation. And finally, it's essential that you evaluate the introduction of the innovation. Understand why and how it's added value or not. and explore ways to make the innovation even more valuable through additional design changes. And that leads you right back to the idea stage. Now, typically, the earlier steps in this process require more creativity to deliver the best outcomes, and the latter stages require more process-oriented thinking in order to be successful. But note that no step of the innovation cycle is any less structured or focused than any of the other. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these steps in detail today. Instead, I want to spend time considering some of the bigger picture elements that support successful innovation. So through the idea, engage and solution stages, so the first half of the innovation cycle, we need to harness the power of diverse perspectives and creativity to come up with new ideas and innovative solutions. Your success at innovation can't be any better than the ideas and options you have on the table in the early stages of the innovation cycle. So it's therefore critical to encourage divergent thinking and not be too quick to knock ideas back because they don't fit the facts as you know them. In my experience, it can sometimes be challenging for highly technical specialists to shift from convergent thinking, where we collect lots of facts and then come up with an answer based on our technical expertise. You know, that shift to divergent thinking can be quite challenging, but you need to do that in order to facilitate innovation. And divergent thinking is the conscious effort to generate new ideas, many, many ideas, as a result of the question being posed. Now, bringing a larger group of people together increases the number of ideas you can generate, and purposely seeking a diversity of perspectives expands the kinds of ideas that will surface. And the key to a group successfully undertaking divergent thinking is for them to have permission and to feel safe to express diverse and sometimes wildly opposing ideas, beliefs and opinions. You know, even the very unpopular, unattractive, unconventional, or just plain absurd ideas. When you're engaged in divergent thinking within a group, it's really easy for judgment and preconceived ideas to slip in. And that can prevent a team from exploring what ultimately might be some of their best ideas. So if you're involved in a group effort focused on generating new ideas and you notice people holding too tightly to preconceived concepts or current technical understanding, push back. If everyone has the same desire to create a solution that's never been thought about before, then everyone needs to be okay with having ideas that can sound silly or uncomfortable. Now, in the divergence mode of creative collaboration, there are 5 practical processes which should be incorporated. So the creative generation of new ideas isn't just about grabbing a bunch of people and putting them in a room and letting a free-for-all happen. Innovation takes intention and planning. So to help facilitate the team to go wide with ideas during the initial stages of the innovation cycle, consider the 5 processes you can see on your screen. You know, question, ask questions, challenge other people's questions. Figure out the questions that matter most to your company or customers. Really hone in on what is the right question. Observe. Watch what's going on around you in your company, in your industry, in the market, in your competitor's office. Notice trends in new technology and relevant research. Network. Connect with your customers, managers, graduates, professional colleagues, and talk. Experiment. Hold thought experiments about what you hear and see. Test the questions that are being asked. And finally, brainstorm. Coordinate and participate in facilitated brainstorming sessions to create many, many ideas that come from many, many different perspectives around how to address the core questions, the right questions. Now, just as important as generating a whole array of creative ideas during this divergence stage idea generation, it's also important to be able to narrow in on what's important. And the convergence of ideas requires just as much creativity as the divergence phase. Narrowing in on the most relevant ideas is often an exercise in combining the best elements of existing concepts into a complementary new option. And of course, that process benefits from multiple perspectives and discussion. Now, a common misconception is to think that as you're moving through these thought processes, divergence and convergence, that it's a linear process. People often think that you start very broad, very wide, and you get increasingly more narrow and focused in your ideas. But it's not such a funnel process. It's almost a dance of going out and coming in and going out and coming in as you move through the innovation cycle. And if you're leading an innovation process, an idea generation process, it's your role to signal what mode of thinking the team should be engaging in at any given moment. When do they need to shift gears between divergence and convergence thinking? There is often a mistake of shifting to convergence mode too early. So even if you've got some great ideas on the table from your team, try to hold back a little and stretch the divergent thinking. And another common pitfall is limiting yourself to one of the existing ideas when you do decide to narrow in. But it's possible, say that there were 5 concepts put on the table through your divergent thinking process, you may actually come up with a 6th idea by pulling in the best pieces from a few of the options as you shift into convergence mode. But do make sure that you don't try and appease everybody in the room just by mashing every idea you've got together, because this is not going to deliver you effective innovation. Now, having discussed the critical concepts around idea generation to support innovation, I'm going to tell you now that getting more ideas is actually not the most critical challenge facing organisations who want to be innovative. New idea generation is often the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about innovation with people, and we must get some new ideas and better ideas. But in fact, there are 3 other critical actions that matter much more when you're determining the ultimate success of innovation. So at this point, I'm going to shift away from considering specific activities that support particular stages of the innovation cycle. I want you to step back and up and focus on thinking about how to truly lead innovation, both from the perspective of a team leader or manager and from the perspective of a team member. And if you're like me, you're playing both roles at the same time. Obviously, I have a line manager or a supervisor, so I can implement the actions around being a team member, but I also lead a geophysics community, and so I can implement the actions as a team leader. So first, let's take a look at some of the ways in which you can successfully lead innovative teams. So when you're leading a team, a department, or even an entire organisation that you want to be innovative, there are 3 critical things you need to think about as a leader. And the first one is about setting specific measurable goals around innovation, monitoring the progress of these, and actively managing innovation in your team. Because the way leaders behave and what they focus on sends a strong message to employees. And we focus most on the things we measure and manage. And McKinsey's survey on leadership and innovation demonstrated that the best way a leader can promote innovation is to encourage it, but spend time managing it, and then create space for employees away from short-term performance goals to support staff to deliver it. But in fact, the most common way that leaders inhibit innovation is by saying that they really want innovation, and then they're seen to be doing absolutely nothing about it. So as a leader, hold yourself accountable for managing innovation, and it'll make a big difference in your team. So some things to think about. Work with your team to define the kind of innovation that helps meet your team's objectives. Encourage the generation of new ideas, but also recognise you've probably got innovative ideas already a part of the fabric of your team. So make sure you acknowledge those and hold everyone accountable for contributing to innovation in your team. Second, you can effectively give permission for innovation to your team members by defining formal innovation goals for your team. And also make innovation a reality for your team by building practical processes for managing experimentation in the team. You know, promote the idea of failing quickly and ensure that key learnings are understood before the next idea is tested. You should think about adding innovation to the formal agenda of all your team meetings and also your peer group meetings. Report on the progress of innovation goals in the team and across the company. Talking about innovation in your team meetings sends an important signal to employees about the value attached to the innovation. And finally, set performance metrics and targets around innovation for yourself. And in doing so, think about two types of metrics. There's the value add of innovation, you know, the dollar value of what innovation can bring to the company, but there's also behaviour around innovation. So, for example, you could have a goal around, you know, the percentage increase of work undertaken as the result of introducing a new innovative technology. But you should also have metrics around behaviours that impact innovation. So something like your team's participation in knowledge sharing forums. Leaders who set targets and metrics around innovation feel most confident in their team's ability to deliver value through innovation. And of course, having goals in place helps you make effective decisions about, you know, what type of innovation should my team be looking at, who should work on the innovation and when should it happen. And leaders who set targets and metrics around innovation have teams that are also focused on innovation. So modelling the right management behaviour encourages and facilitates employees to actively engage in innovation. So the second thing you need to think about as a team leader is about using the right organisational structures to support innovation. Now, broadly speaking, there are two types of organisational structures. We've got the organic network structures, and then we have the probably more traditional hierarchical structures. Hierarchical organisational structures are more rigid. They have precise job descriptions, a top-down structure, restricted autonomy, and the emphasis is on control and coordination. Now, this type of structure is brilliant for execution work, but it isn't so good for responding quickly to new ideas or being nimble and agile in the face of change. So very innovative organisations, more often than not, have organic, decentralised structures. Authority is still evident, but its people move more fluidly around the organisation in their day-to-day work. So why are decentralised structures better for innovation? Well, it's because of two key features of organisational structures that impact innovation. So the first is that knowledge sharing across an organisation is absolutely critical to support innovative outcomes. And the greater the heterogeneity of idea sharing, the more likely you're going to generate really creative solutions. And this horizontal sharing of information and collaborative problem solving tends to occur far more effectively when there are flexible boundaries within the organisation. Research also shows that the more decentralised and the greater the number of connections across staff teams, the higher the performing the organisation is in terms of innovation. Now, the second organisational feature that matters when it comes to innovation is decision-making. And decentralised decision-making empowers employees to seek creative solutions. People have more commitment to testing and pushing new ideas when they feel they have control over their own approach to work. You know, it's not just someone up there in the bureaucracy who doesn't really get what I do, making a decision about how I do my job. In addition, decentralised decision-making facilitates fast and efficient adaptations to a changing environment so that innovation can happen as and when it's required, as opposed to having to go up a whole hierarchy for approval and then come back down. By then you could have missed the opportunity. Now, I recognise that some of you who are team leaders and managers online here must have to lead a team that needs to exist within a hierarchical organisational structure. I mean, unless we're the CEO and own the company, we can't redesign the organisational structure. But think about this. What are you doing as a team leader to actively promote and encourage cross-team communication and knowledge sharing? What are you doing as a team leader about breaking down the formalities of hierarchical structure, at least in the horizontal direction for your team members? And how do you approve and support decisions around innovative approaches to work or the use of new technology within your team? Are you empowering your team members through local or decentralised decision making? And then the third thing, the final thing that a team leader needs to think about is creating the right culture for innovation. And this is critically important. I find it really interesting that senior executives believe that their single biggest challenge to meeting innovation goals is obtaining enough people with the right kinds of talent for their innovation projects. But if you ask employees, they believe that the organisations already have sufficient talent within the organisation, but in fact that it's corporate culture that inhibits them from innovating. So what does a culture for innovation look like? Well, I mean, obviously there needs to be an openness to new ideas and a willingness to experiment and take risks. But the number one challenge to achieving that is to create an environment of trust. So it's essential that people genuinely feel like they're working in a safe place where they can take creative risks and fail without any sense of threat or embarrassment. Employees need to feel comfortable making themselves vulnerable in front of people that they see every day. Now, what contributes to this sense of psychological safety? Well, it's in the way the team leader engages with her team members, you know, the tone of her voice, the words she uses, the behaviour she models, and it's in the way she orchestrates the interaction of her team members among themselves and with other teams across the company. And the first priority is to create a place where risk-taking is allowable and failure is seen as an opportunity to learn rather than a threat to employment. And of course, criticism or punishment for not being able to make an innovative idea work, no matter how subtle, it's not going to encourage the team to continue innovating. In my experience, a team leader will also likely need to be prepared to advocate on behalf of her team and perhaps even defend them across the company when the culture of other teams imposes the threat of criticism in light of failure on her own team. Now, there needs to also be a sense of transparency within the team around knowledge and experiences on team projects, but also about positive and negative outcomes of any innovation initiatives. And a team leader will also need to model and promote this sense of transparency across the broader organisation so as to support innovation in her own team, because as we know, innovation is not going to happen in a silo. The team has to be able to interact with other people across the company. There also needs to be continuous coordination and active management of innovation. You know, innovation is not something that's just going to happen accidentally on the side. As a leader, you need to care about efficient innovation practices. You need to have practical processes in place to support the testing of new ideas and how to learn from failures. You need to measure performance and share the results of that measurement. Basically, you just need to be a proactive leader for successful innovation. Don't just hope that it's going to happen. And finally, as a leader, you need to celebrate innovation. And I don't mean just celebrating the final output of any innovation project. You need to celebrate the courage and the efforts of the people contributing to the innovation. Whether they came up with the idea, they implemented the idea, they evaluated the innovation, or maybe they were just covering teamwork while others contributed to the innovation project. Everybody wants to know that their efforts are valued and appreciated. So they're the top 3 things that team leaders and managers can do to support leading for innovation. But what about if you don't have a formal leadership role in your company? How can you lead for innovation in that situation? Well, first of all, I strongly believe anybody can lead from any position. We don't need a job title to demonstrate leadership. But in light of all of the key elements to successful innovation that we've already discussed today, there are 5 things you can do right now to influence innovation in your company from below. And as it turns out, as you practice these personal behaviours now to support innovation in your company, you're actually flexing the innovation muscles that you need to be a successful leader that supports and delivers innovation in the future. So leading for innovation from below. We've talked about how innovation relies on creative thinking and diverse perspectives, that we need to ask the right questions and challenge ourselves to create new and different ideas. So one of the best things you can do to support innovation is to promote and participate in formal and informal sharing networks across your company. Become a key collaborative hub, the go-to person. Step out of your silo and find out what others are working on. Seek pockets of people in your organisation with the right mindset for innovation and share challenges. Brainstorm new ideas together and figure out together how you can create space for innovation and testing new ideas within the boundaries of your everyday work. Each year, most of us will be asked to define our performance and development goals for the year. So I encourage you to write into your performance plan 1 or 2 goals around innovation that can help you achieve your objectives and agree them with your team leader. Now, it might be testing a new piece of software or putting some new hardware in place on a particular project. It might be creating a cross-discipline team for diverse expertise on a project or defining a new way of work. Even without a particularly supportive team leader, it's usually possible to obtain the go-ahead for at least 1 innovative action through the year. And in this way, you are designing opportunity to demonstrate how innovation can add value to your company. And you're helping those around you understand the importance of goal setting and measuring progress for successful innovation. And you never know, the results of your innovation experiments might make headlines across your team or across the company and encourage more people to become more innovative in the future. Now, we've talked about how a culture for innovation needs to provide psychological safety, that sense of trust that you will feel safe in the pursuit of innovation, even if it's not successful. And when you're working in a safe environment, you know that the people you're making yourself vulnerable to are offering you the benefit of the doubt as you take a risk on some new idea or process or product. You can't control others giving you that safe space. You don't know how they're going to react when you take a risk on innovation, but you can control the offering of psychological safety to others. So offer it liberally, provide help and resources, be a sounding board, celebrate the victories of others, and be there to remind colleagues that failure is just one step towards success when things don't work out. And then, when it's your turn to take a risk, your teammates will be much more likely to offer trust and psychological safety in return. Because what we give to other people, we also tend to give to ourselves. Now, most of us are taught from a very young age that failure only leads to things that are bad. You know, if we try something and it doesn't work out, there'll be negative consequences. And as a result, many of us have an internal dialogue that constantly reminds us of the danger of innovation. You know, what if they don't like my idea? What if I don't succeed and I lose my job? But we can choose to look at things differently, to encourage ourselves to let our guard down and take a chance on innovation in our workplace. So, you know, what if next time when you're nervous about suggesting something new or trying to do something in a different way, just tell yourself failure is just a step on the path to success, or if it doesn't work out, I'll learn from it and I'll make it better next time. These are ways to look at failure in a positive light. Other positive statements any more true or false than the negative dialogues we have running through our head. No, they're just a different way of looking at exactly the same situation. But you have the ability to choose your perspective. And I encourage you to choose the one that supports your ability to innovate and succeed in the long term. And finally, be constantly on the lookout for innovation around you, in your team, in your company, in your industry. Become informed about new ways of work and technologies that could be applicable to your workplace, and discuss them with your colleagues and managers regularly. This is really important. Talk about it. Essentially, you must become an advocate for innovation, demonstrating the value it can bring to your team and organisation. So I'm excited that there's more and more people talking about how to make innovation work. These days, it really is a business imperative. Sometimes I get frustrated, particularly in our industry, that we move so slowly with innovation. But I hope you're all committed to making innovation a reality in your corner of the world. So on the screen now is a reminder of the incredibly important, but perhaps not so obvious factors that can make or break innovation in your company. And I hope I've left you with some ideas for how you might go about stepping into the role of leading for innovation. And I wanted to leave you with one final thought. No organisation ever created an innovation. People innovate, not companies. And all of us, you and me, we are people, and we are capable of making innovation happen. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions. If people have questions, you can either chat to them, or you can switch your microphone on and talk your questions. Someone's asked on the chat line, what do I mean about the right structures? I'm talking about the decision-making business structures in your organisation. Whether it's a hierarchical structure, you know, do you have a CEO and then a level of managers and another level of managers and another level of managers, and everybody has a strict job and everybody works in a department and no one's allowed to talk to other departments, versus a networked organisation where people move very freely across project teams and you get interdisciplinary collaboration all the time. So it's the business model of the company. That's what I mean by structures.
Could I make a comment and ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Who's talking?
Oh, yeah. Hi, it's Michelle. I work at Equinor. I've called in from our Houston office. And,
great. Nice to meet you, Michelle.
You too. Fantastic talk. It's very, very key at the moment. Everybody's talking about this topic. And just on the structural side, you know, I worked in R&D for a while, exploration for a while, different parts of the company. And we know we're on the cusp, the whole of oil and gas knows they're on the cusp of a huge change into new energy and new low carbon and all of these new developments that are going to happen. So what we did, because it's very hard, you know, most of us oil companies, we are big centers of expertise. We're very technical. We're usually a little bit hierarchical and kind of heavy. And to change into a light and nimble, you know, technology innovator is tricky, but we can do it. And so what we've done at Equinor, and I don't know if any other companies have done this, but it is a structure that's working. We've set up a unit called Entrepreneurial Innovation Program, and we copy what the external incubators do. We do the external incubators as well. And we've been doing that for years through ventures, but we've taken that model and brought it into the company, and we do annual competitions, which are supported at the very highest level of the company, open to everybody, to put an idea in, gather themselves a team, and they get help in gathering the team, and then bring the idea right through to compete with maybe 100 others, and then the top 5 get funding for 1 year in small increments to make their idea come alive. And they're allowed to fail as long as they don't spend ridiculous amounts of money. They can fail after each sprint of the technology development. So it's a very good structure. It works really well, but it takes management, senior management support to do this. But it's wonderful to see it working at Equinor, and I'm sure other companies can make that work.
That's right, and it's a really smart way to acknowledge that while we might have very large hierarchical organisations, we're acknowledging that a different style is needed for an innovation incubator group, and so you create space for that to happen. That's a really smart compromise.
Yeah, and we're finding there are just so many innovative people in the company. As soon as you take the shackles off them, they really come up and can run fantastic things, which they've never done before. So you do release a lot of energy in the company when you do it.
That's exactly right. So, you know, you created permission for them to innovate, you've created a structure and a process through which they can innovate, and suddenly then they're able to do it. And it is true that, you know, generating new ideas isn't necessarily, or bringing in new talent isn't necessarily the priority, because it's already all there in the company. You've just got to facilitate it to happen.
Yeah, we've got financial people working on nanotechnology. Imagine that.
That's great. Excellent. Thank you.
Great talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. So I've got a question on the chat here from Monica. Any recommendations for identifying innovative employees during an interview process? Well, look, I have to say I haven't specifically interviewed for the purposes of building an innovation team, because I guess I expect all my geophysicists to be innovative in some form. You could ask them about how have they demonstrated initiative in bringing innovation into their workplace. But you want practical examples. You don't want theoretical responses. You could also give them practical exercises, problem-solving exercises on the fly through the interview process to see how they respond. Any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming along today. I really enjoyed having a chat with you.
Natasha, thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful program.
Great. Thanks very much, Ellie. Bye-bye.
Bye.